Hi everybody, welcome once again. And in today's video, I will explain you how indirect tax affects the market and various stakeholders in the market and how it leads to a welfare loss in the market. Here, as you can see in this diagram, in the absence of any indirect tax, P star represents the equilibrium price and Q star represents the equilibrium quantity. Now let's assume that the government imposes a specific tax. In case of a specific tax, the supply curve will shift leftwards or upwards by the amount of tax because specific tax represents a tax that is imposed on per unit, a fixed tax that is imposed on per unit of output. So a fixed amount will be charged on per unit of output. For example, let's say $5 on each packet of cigarette. So in this case, as a result of specific tax, the supply curve will shift upwards parallelly like this. So this is the new supply curve after the imposition of specific tax. Now in this case, as a result of specific tax, as we can see here that there is an upward shift in the supply curve, the new supply curve is S1 by the amount of tax here in this case, let's say $5 per unit of output that is uh, sold. So in this case, again, there will be a change in the price that is paid by the consumer and the price that is received by the producer. So as a result of specific tax, now this is the new equilibrium. So this is the price that is paid by the consumer now. And because of the tax here, this quantity, as we can see, the amount that is received by the producer is now PP instead of the earlier price of P star. So when the tax was not imposed in the market, this portion represented at that point of time um, consumer surplus, and this portion represented producer surplus. But now since the tax has been imposed, so there is a loss in both consumer and producer surplus. Though the government here has gained in terms of the revenue because of this specific tax. Consumers are worse off, reason being, earlier they were paying this price P star, but now they have to pay this price PC. So technically, the price has increased. And at the same time, if you look at the quantity that they're getting, there is a fall in the quantity as well. So consumers are worse off. The quantity um, has decreased from Q star to Q2, QT. Then let's talk about producers. Overall, producers are worse off, reason being a fall in their revenue because earlier they were getting this price, now they are getting a price of P, which is less by the amount of tax, and at the same time there is a fall in the quantity that they are selling. So again, they are at loss. Overall, there is a fall in revenue for the producers. If we look at the earlier scenario, uh, at this equilibrium E star. So the revenue of the producer was P star times the quantity, equilibrium quantity without any tax. But after the specific tax here, as we can see that there is a fall in revenue. So now the revenue is PP times QT. So now this portion, as we can see here, this rectangle represents producer's revenue, which is comparatively less than the earlier revenue that he was getting before taxation. If we talk about government, so government is the only stakeholder that gains here, and as we can see here that the government's revenue after the tax is represented by this area, because this is the amount of tax, the difference between uh, PC minus PP times the quantity of output, that is QT. So this represents the government's revenue. So this area we can say that this shaded area is the revenue for the government. Our last stakeholder, that is workers, they may be worse off because of the tax, because uh, the output that is now produced after the tax is less than what was produced earlier before the tax. Now let's see that how this tax will lead to welfare loss and a loss in producer and consumer surplus in the society. Now let's find out producer and consumer surplus after the tax. And please remember that in order to find out producer surplus, we will be considering the initial supply curve. So for producer surplus, as you can see here, that earlier this whole complete portion was a producer surplus before the tax. But now, as a result of tax, this portion goes to the government out of the producer surplus, and now less output is produced. So there is under allocation of resources, as we can see here, that in this case, the marginal benefit that the society is deriving from this good is greater than from this demand curve. We can say that the marginal benefit at this output is greater than the marginal cost. That means there is under allocation of resources towards production of this good, and overall there is a loss in producer surplus as a result of the tax. So now only this much portion is left in the form of producer surplus. Consumer is left only with this portion D, since they are getting less number of units of output and they have to pay a higher price. Overall, we can say that there is a fall in both producer as well as consumer surplus, um, and less number of resources are allocated towards the production of this good. So there is under allocation of resources, as we can see this in terms of a higher marginal benefit derived from this good as compared to the marginal cost. This portion, this triangle, represents producer surplus after the tax, and this B triangle here, this part represents consumer surplus, and this part goes to the government in the form of revenue. Since marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost, this leads to a welfare loss as represented by this area, this triangle, as you can see here, this shaded area. Because of under allocation of resources and less number of units are produced than the socially optimum output level. So here we can represent our welfare loss as a result of under allocation of resources towards the production of this good.